Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4099. Today's date is June 13, 2026. It's been almost like a morning at 7:58 a.m. It's a very beautiful morning, by the way. Monsoon is started, like beginning to started. Okay. Probably the monsoon, like a weather forecast says that ki till the 17th of June monsoon will gonna start. But yesterday, last night was rain actually happened, and it felt really good. The weather is like a very pleasing right now. I'm kind of like a waiting for monsoon. So okay, another thing, I look very weird. I am kind of like a looking in myself in this selfie video, and this without beard I look very weird. Yeah. Okay, let me tell you one thing regarding about my face characteristic. Okay, so if I smile, my these eyes are kind of like a like it just close lot more than this eyes like this or this. Like, have you ever kind of like a see the difference? Like if I smile, so this eyes is kind of like a lot more closer than this eyes. Okay. um so like usually I recognize that ki when I take a selfie, okay, with my friend, so usually when I smile, this kind of like a difference, it's kind of like a feel like really not so wrong. Okay. Why these eyes leads are kind of like a close lot more than these eyes, is because of like a smile. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Now the human's face have kind of like a, somebody have so many muscles. Okay. And because of we have so many muscles on our face, we could represent emotions like a like smile, sad, or excited, um, um, anxious. Okay. uh, because of this. And okay, why do we have a kind of like some expression, and why do we kind of like somebody that represent that, like, okay, basically is this thing na ki, um uh, can every species can able to be express their emotion through faces? Well, some are like a cat does, dog does. um I'm not really sure about kind of like a things. Okay, yeah, because of that na ki, um, can every species feel emotion? I would say they have a kind of like a survival instinct. So definitely they have kind of like some sort of, obviously they would have some sort of emotions. But their facial structure is not kind of like a built up in such a way that they could represent the emotions, but their body kind of like a represent the emotions. um, Usually in most of the species, in also humans too, how much like a eyelid is a kind of like a bit more common. Okay, like we have eyelid. Okay, these are eyelid. Okay. And every species have eyelid. Birds, reptiles, like everything, chicken, goat, every, they have a kind of like eyelids. And usually, yeah, most of the species have kind of like a very common way to express the emotion through eyelids. How much they close and how much they open represent their emotions. I think, I'm not really sure about that, but this is what I kind of like simply realized throughout the kind of like looking at the animals and things and that probably. um, and we also use our eyes structure a lot to represent emotions, almost much more than rest of the kind of like if I kind of like somebody put the black bar, then we can't even recognize the particular person, even if just kind of like a cover the eyes. Okay, because rest of the kind of like a facial structure, it's somewhat something kind of like a common, but it's not really that. But eyes are kind of like a somebody represent the identity the most. Okay, in your facial structure, eyes are kind of like a represent your identity the most. So if you hide the black bar, then probably you might not even recognize, or maybe it's very difficult to recognize even if you kind of like see my entire face. But eyes are kind of like a things that represent the identity or things. Okay, yeah, because eyes are kind of like a represent the emotions much more than rest of the kind of like a facial structure and things like that and that. Yeah, it's a fact probably. Is it fact? I'm not really sure. This is kind of like a stuff that I kind of like simply experience while looking at the stuff. All right, yeah, let's just jump into the question. All right, so question is, did I spend time on my most important goal today? Okay, that's a really good question. Okay. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? Couple of days ago, I read a book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and I wanted to implement the value that book taught me. How do I supposed to do that? By asking question to myself and giving the honest answer. So I went to ChatGPT. I said I read this book. I wanted to implement the value. Suggest me 20 question. ChatGPT kind of like a suggest me 20 question. So this is one of those questions. The question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording I cannot do anything at all. So that's why I wrote the question in this book. This is the question. This is a kind of like a doodle. It's not a doodle, by the way. It's a kind of like a something for my understanding. Okay, I am kind of like a reading this book, The Principia of Isaac Newton. Really amazing book. Highly recommend to you to read this book, but it's a very difficult to read the book. Why? Because the language and the things are over here are it is also kind of like a feel really very difficult for me to read this book. So I am using ChatGPT to kind of like understand the context and understand the things, like how I supposed to read that thing. Okay, so basically if I'm kind of like right now I will gonna read like today I read this. Okay, so basically I took a photo, upload that photo on kind of like a ChatGPT, kind of like explain that ki suggest means simple language. ChatGPT kind of like explain means simple language, and that's the why I could able to be understand this book is kind of like a much more easier and much more kind of like a better way. If I'm try to read this thing, probably I might not gonna consume that many information. Okay, and after I consume the information through ChatGPT, I drew some sort of kind of like assembly the images over here to understand the concept better. Like basically this is a kind of like a image about the relative time and absolute time. Okay, what is exactly the kind of like a Newton kind of like a describe. Okay, so this is kind of like a two dimension of time. Okay, so this is the relative time. What's the relative time? Okay, let me kind of like a put you. So this is a kind of like a box. This is the day, this is the night, and this is the train. Okay, so the way that we actually experience the time is moving forward. So that is a kind of like a relative motion. Okay, yeah. But absolute time is a kind of like a bit more different, because in the absolute time from Newton point of perspective, is a kind of like a something is this thing just flowing forward. It does not go backward. It does not go kind of like a it just always go forward with a constant speed, and it represent through this celestial body like a sun, earth, and things. They are always been moving at constant speed and things and that. For us, like if the kind of like a entire clock in the earth will stop, but time does not stop. Time always kind of like a move forward with a constant speed. This is kind of like a represent by kind of like Isaac Newton. And this is another kind of like image is also regarding about the kind of like assembly absolute space. Okay, and relative space. So absolute space means like that the way that you move in your home and things and that that's a kind of like a relative space. But when you kind of like a go little bit higher, like a earth, solar system, or galaxy, then you realize that key, like from Newton point of perspective, that key everything is kind of like a something stable in the galaxy. Galaxy just kind of like a something rotate around its on particular space and that space does not move. Okay, so it's a kind of like a stage where characters are kind of like a move, but the stage are kind of like a stagnant. So it's a kind of like a things that Isaac Newton kind of like described. This is a kind of like a doodle or kind of like a really helped me a lot to understand the concept much more better regarding about what exactly the Newton says, and this is how I kind of like consuming the information. Okay, yeah. There is a lot of kind of like a doodle I did, like this doodle, this is that is too much, yeah. But probably it would be kind of like a much more better to draw the kind of like a somebody drawing would be kind of like a much more better, yeah. So this is, by the way, there is a so many kind of like a things. I just started reading a book and this is kind of like a pages still I read. There are almost like a 800 pages and oh my god. But the one thing is that now, because I'm using the chat GPT to kind of like understand the concept, I think that na ki I would able to be complete this book. Maybe if I wanted to, I might gonna complete this book maybe like a 2-3 months. Yeah, at least like a 3 months gonna took me that to complete this book. So yeah. If you are really in it's not just about the time and space. There are kind of like a lot of mathematical calculation over here to weigh that kind of like a described by Isaac Newton, that how is exactly this gravity actually happening and things and that I wanted to understand from his point of perspective. So yes, and yeah, it's really helping me to understand the concept much more better. uh, I would recommend to you, but like highly recommend. Yeah, just read the book. Okay, yeah, but it really required a kind of like a lot of kind of like a thought process. Like a thought process means like that, na ki you have to unlearn something regarding about gravity, regarding about time and things. Your perspective has to be kind of like a shifted something else. You cannot kind of like hold your kind of like a thought process and read the book and you realize that no, this is wrong. Like basically it's the thing that na ki I am reading this book in 2026. The Isaac Newton read the wrote this book in 16 something 16th century, 1640 something like that. At that period of time, almost like a 400 year ago, this concept is not even exist. Like people doesn't really knew that ki kind of like a sun and earth are kind of like a moving around and things and that at that time people are kind of like consider that ki earth is a flat and everyone rooted around the planet earth. And these are kind of like concept is kind of like a far more kind of like a something like a yeah, far more kind of like a something very weird. So from Newton point of perspective, the way that he think from this kind of like concept is kind of like a much more higher. But in 2026 point of perspective, this is completely false. Okay, yeah, we knew that ki time is not kind of like a something like that ki absolute. Time is a relative. Okay, yeah, throughout the gravity, time can change. Time is a kind of like a things by the Einstein general relativity theory. So these are kind of like a simply information that I already knew it, but when I read this book, I have to be kind of like a simply step that information aside and kind of like a try to consume the Newton point of perspective, what is exactly his opinion and things and that. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing? It's not really unlearn. It's a kind of like a things that na ki whatever the kind of like a things that you knew regarding about stuff, you have to be take that like a little bit of side and kind of like a understand the concept first. And yeah, it's not really unlearn. It's a kind of like a things that you figure it out the concept first and then try to judge. Okay, because when I read the book, I was kind of like judging Isaac Newton. Dude, are you fucking kidding me? Like absolute time is completely non-exist. Okay, yeah, but then I realized that dude, like the Einstein was not even born when the Newton was kind of like doing this discovery. Yeah, whatever. But it had so much amount of value in myself. Like basically, it's this thing that na ki the like like in our classroom we kind of like simply understand the Newton's law, Newton third's laws and things and that, but I never really understand that much kind of like a things. But while I was reading the book, and it felt really good. It felt something that ki, yeah, it adds so much amount of value. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Question. Yeah. Okay. Question. The question is that, sorry. The question is that ki, did I spend time on most important thing? Did I spend time on most important thing? Okay, the one thing I realized regarding about the most important time. Okay, whoever you are, Okay, and whatever the kind of like a person you are, you wanted to achieve your goals, ambitions, and things and that. Every person have their kind of like a goals, every person have their kind of like ambition, every person have their that key they wanted to achieve this, they wanted to do this, they wanted to do that. Okay, yeah, but is it actually, or is it is it actually like, basically let me tell you something. Okay, yeah. Have you ever kind of like a experience that some people are wanted to become something but they became very different in their life? Okay, like have you ever kind of like experience, it's not like okay, my father wanted to become a doctor, but they didn't become doctor, they became teacher. Why? What is exactly reason? So many things, okay, regarding about money, financial choices, and things and that. So that's why my father didn't really became the doctor, they became the teacher. Okay. um, when I was kind of like a teenager, at that age of 17, I wanted to become a filmmaker, and I still wanted to become a filmmaker. But at that time, filmmaking is a kind of like a one of my most important goal, most important ambitions, and things and that. But since at the age of 32, I realized that I will gonna make films, but it's not my important goal. My important goal is that kind of like a something, build the artifact, build the Adam, build the Gurukul. These are kind of like a things that I wanted to do. Okay. So what I realized that your goal or your ambition are relative. Relative means a change according to the time, according to the kind of like a, according to the situations and things and that. Okay. And kind of like a something that somewhat something that everyone kind of like experience, that it's not really that people kind of like a thing that they wanted to achieve this and they will achieve that. Kind of like some sort of kind of like a tiny differences actually happen regarding about their imagination and their reality. It's not really that they cannot able to be achieve the things that they would imagine, but kind of like a things, like example is this thing that most of the people are kind of like a wanted to become a Bollywood actor, but end up became a kind of like a casting director. Okay, yeah. So basically, it's associated with the Bollywood acting and things and that. But they kind of like it's not Bollywood actor. They became kind of like a casting director. Okay, so it's kind of like that. Like basically, I wanted to become a kind of like a something that astronaut, but end up I became a kind of like a space engineer. So your reality is associate with the same surrounding situation, but not the exact the way you think it is. You decided that you wanted to become the rock star, but end up you became kind of like a some sound engineer in concert. So you are been into the same situation surrounding, but you are not became the rock star, you became kind of like a sound engineer or whatever it is. So this is what is it like, your thoughts or the way that you wanted to become and way that you become is a little bit difference. Like it's not exactly right, but somewhat something right. Like you are been into that surrounding situation, you wanted to become a pilot, but you will become a kind of like a something that air traffic control officer. Okay. So yeah, like a air traffic control officer is somewhat something associated with the kind of like a navigation and kind of like a somebody kind of like a navigation and kind of like a aerodynamics and things and that, right? So this is what is it. Okay. Now if that is true, which is true, okay, then do I spend more time on things that I wanted to do? Now this question is a kind of like a very much kind of like a complicated. Okay. Okay, let me tell you one thing, this question is very simple. Like I have to be say that am I spending so much time on things that I wanted to achieve? I would gonna say yes, end of the question. But I have to be understand the concept regarding about that. Okay, because the way that we wanted to become, the person that I wanted to become is relative. Okay, yeah. Then what is actually my most important work? It's a kind of like a very fragile situation. Let me explain in simple language. um, let's just say I wanted to become a Bollywood actor. Okay. Now this is my goal, this is my ambition, this is I wanted to do. Okay. I will gonna sacrifice everything for kind of like a became the Bollywood actor. Okay. Now if I'm gonna say I wanted to become that Bollywood actor, so what kind of like action do I have to do to become that Bollywood actor? I have to do acting, I have to go to the theater, I have to kind of like assembly the practice on my skills, practice on my character description, things like whatever the acting workshop and things and that. I will gonna do more to kind of like get my acting skills as much as better, method acting and things and that camera acting, वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह. Okay, to become the actor. Okay, yeah. But I end up became the casting director. I end up became the casting director. Okay, end up became means what? Like basically it's this thing that ki at the age of 17 I realized that I wanted to become actor. I put my effort, I kind of like simply went to the Bombay, I kind of like did everything. Okay, yeah. And at the age of kind of like somebody that ki 21 I got a role at a kind of like a very small role in kind of like a web show and things and that. For kind of like a particular period of time, then I kind of like simply do struggle things that to kind of like but I didn't really get a kind of like somebody very significant role in an acting career. I get a role, but kind of like a extras or kind of like a somebody that kind of like a somebody side character and things and that. Okay, and my career is not able to be survive on those side character and extras and things and that. But I realized that there is a kind of like opportunity is actually available in casting director. Okay, and my skills are kind of like a somewhat something associated with that thing, because I did a lot of acting and I did have a kind of like a lot of kind of like a acting information regarding about that. Casting director is a kind of like a somewhat something associated with the acting, and also it has opportunity and I am fit for that casting director. So I enroll over there and I became the casting director. It's not actually happened in a couple of years, it actually happened almost like a decade of year, because you wanted to become actor, you put effort for 20 years, and after 20 years you realize that dude, it's like a became actor, it's not really possible or not feasible or things and that. So you decided to kind of like a became a casting director, which is a associate with acting related but little bit different path. Okay, yeah. So time span would be kind of like a 20-30 year. Oh yeah. So let's just say at the age of 17 you wanted to become actor, but at the age of 43 you will become a kind of like a casting director. Okay, now casting director is a kind of like a things that you end up kind of like a doing this role for rest of the lifetime. All right. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that my goal wanted to become actor, I end up became the casting director. Okay, so what I'm saying is that your goal is a relative. It's not completely depend on you, it's depend on situation, time, surrounding and lot of stuff. Okay, yeah. Your goal is never been your goal. Your goal is associated with a lot of surrounding situations, consequences and things and that. Okay, so because of all those things you became the casting director. So basically the nature is a kind of like a something, or nature or whatever, the god or whatever it is. Okay, yeah. Does he kind of like give you purpose to kind of like a someone became something? No, not because god or nature or things, it doesn't really kind of like somebody give you any guidelines that what do you want to become. They only kind of like give you guideline regarding about survive yourself. Okay, in this wilderness of areas and things and that. And how do we supposed to survive in modern world? Money. Okay, we need money to survive and things and that. Okay, so basically while chasing the acting career I might not get that much amount of money, but when I went to the casting director I might earn decent amount of money, so that I would supposed to be survive. So basically nature is kind of like a decided that to kind of like a something you have to be kind of like a survive, and casting director is a kind of like a somebody the profession that you might gonna survive more. So basically you choose to become casting director and you end up become the casting director. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, your goal is relative. You wanted to become actor, but end up became casting director. So your goal is a different. Your goal is a kind of like a relative throughout the time and things and that. So if your goal or if you're the stuff that you wanted to become is a kind of like a relative, so what is actually important work for me? Acting or casting director? Okay, so like do you understand the concept? it's a kind of like a things that na ki basically is this thing like do you understand the concept now? You are kind of like putting a lot of effort for acting and things and that you think that ki, this is my most important work, and I'm kind of like spending more and more time on kind of like acting and things and that, but kind of like things that ki you became a kind of like a casting director. Okay, so basically your goal is a kind of like a relative, it change according to the situation surrounding and consequences. Okay, yeah. So if my goal is a kind of like a changing, then what is actually my most important work? How do I supposed to be new, right? It's a kind of like a very like a fragile question. I don't know that. Okay, let me kind of like tell you something even more like even more simple language. Okay, yeah. Same example. Let's just say I wanted to become a pilot. Okay, yeah. Kind of like airline pilot, and I wanted to fly the plane and things and that. Okay, my father is a pilot, my kind of like a grandfather is a pilot. Okay, so I want to kind of like assembly the school where they kind of like taught us regarding about how to become pilot and things and that. I spend a lot of time on simulation, I spend a lot of times on things. I did fly. Okay, I did became the pilot, by the way, and I did fly. But kind of like a things that na ki at the age of kind of like a something 37, I had a kind of like eye surgery, and because of this thing my vision is a kind of like a little bit of blurry. It's not really I'm became blind, no, it's a little bit of blurry. And because of this thing I will not kind of like a somebody fit into the role of pilot. So I will not gonna fit into the pilot, but because of this kind of like a somebody that I have kind of like a somebody knowledge regarding about pilots and things and that. So I realized that I am kind of like a bit more kind of like a something bit more kind of like a really good at kind of like a somebody ATC officer, air traffic control officer. Okay, I kind of like interview over there and I kind of like a fit for the role. Even if my deficiency, I kind of like perform really well in the air traffic controller. Okay, so basically is this thing that what is actually my important work today? Like basically if I'm end up kind of like became the ATC officer, then I am kind of like spending more and more time on kind of like doing piloting. So what is actually my most important work? Okay, yeah, like being a pilot or being an ATC officer. But being ATC officer is, I don't know that I will gonna become more that, because I'm kind of like putting the work today right now na. Okay, so this is what it is. This is what kind of like things. Your goal is a kind of like a relative, so your work is a kind of like you are not really sure is right or is a kind of like important. You think that is important, but in a long run that is not important, but probably it is also important too. Okay, because of you kind of like a study regarding about pilot, you understand the navigation, you understand the things, and because of all those things you end up became a kind of like a somebody ATC officer, which kind of like a really help you to kind of like a somebody knew about all those things. So that's why in this thing you decided to become an actor, but you became a casting director. You decided to become a pilot, you became ATC officer. You decided to become a kind of like a business person, but kind of like a somewhat something became kind of like a somebody that key analyst or things and that. You, it's not really that you decided a significant something exactly, but you end up became a kind of like a part of that something. Like it's not really that you will kind of like a became wanted to become an actor, but somehow you become a kind of like ATC officer. This will not gonna happen. Okay, this will the nature is does not kind of like a somebody want you to become ATC officer. Why? Because you are put all your effort to be acting. So basically your the role will kind of like somebody execute throughout the acting career, like a casting director or kind of like somebody casting something like that, or acting workshop manager, or kind of like a kind of acting teacher or things and that. These roles are kind of like a unlocked for you because you have kind of like a entire information regarding about how to become an actor. A pilot have a kind of like a spend a lot of time regarding about the piloting, navigations and things and that. So it unlock kind of like a somebody navigation, it unlock the kind of like a pilot training, it unlock the kind of like a simulation program, or in these are kind of like a roles are unlocked, and you kind of like a chose to become this kind of like a stuff. Okay, yeah. So your kind of like a things are always associated with the whole, not kind of like a one specific thing. Alright. So regarding about this question, the question says that what is actually my important work? Am I kind of like spending my time on most important work? So if I'm gonna say this thing, I want like basically who do I want to become? I wanted to become a kind of like a something that I don't know what I wanted to become. Oh yeah, I wanted to build the application. That application will kind of like add value in people's life. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing now? If you attach your role with a kind of like a some certain thing, then it's a kind of like a things that na ki like a you are like a I don't know how to supposed to explain. Okay, yeah. It's a kind of like a things that na like I'm trying to understand, but I'm not understanding at the same time because um, I don't know. Okay, let me tell you something. Okay, what is the most important work right now? Okay, who will kind of like give the answer? Obviously you. Okay, yeah. Like basically, you know what is actually most important. No one will gonna know what is actually most important work. Okay, yeah. And how you know that what is actually most important work regarding about your goal, regarding about your ambition, regarding about things and that and that. All right. Okay, but your goal and ambition will gonna relative. It change according to the time, situation, and surrounding. Okay, so basically, is this thing your goal is a kind of like a somewhat something not like a exact. Okay, so you might not know that will I become that particular person, will become that particular person or not. Okay, yeah. But if your goal is not to become something, if your goal is to kind of like a somebody that key meant for someone, like example, I wanted to become an actor. This is my goal. So I end up became the acting related job, casting director, acting manager, or acting workshop teacher, things and that. But if you decided that I wanted to add value to the people, then you end up became adding value to the people. Like example is this thing. I'm not saying that I wanted to become a kind of like a business person who kind of like build the artifact and this and no. I decided that I wanted to become a kind of like a making sure like I wanted that because of my work, because of this artifact, it adds so much amount of value in me. I wanted to share this value to the people life. Okay, yeah. So this is my goal. My goal is that whatever the kind of like assembly, the knowledge that I get from the artifact, I wanted to share this value to the people. Okay, yeah. I wanted to give them a kind of like assembly, a right direction regarding about your thought process and things and that and that. Okay, through the artifact. So if I kind of like set this thing, then I will become that. Because my work is kind of like associated with somebody. It's not really that I wanted to become something. It's that whatever the action that you do, does it add value in the people life? If you set this goal, then you will become that particular person. Okay, yeah. Like example is this thing. Do not consider yourself as an actor. My goal is to not to become actor. Is your goal is kind of like something that I wanted to kind of like something perform in such a way that audience will blow their mind. Okay, if you have this thought process, then you will become more likely to become actor. Your higher chances to become actor because you are not thinking about become something. You are thinking about kind of like became something that kind of like a you are kind of like you are thinking about something that you wanted to apply value in people life. If you kind of like decide in that way, that higher chances that you will become that particular person. Okay, yeah. So don't think about become actor or kind of like a doctor or things and that. Think about that what kind of like a value that you add to the community, to society and things and that. If you kind of like think that, then like a degree or things doesn't really make sense at all. You will become the doctor, you will become the actor, you will become the kind of like a pilot, you will become the everything. Okay, because you kind of like shift your mindset to kind of like adding value to the community. If you set this thing, if you kind of like decided a role that what kind of like a value am I adding to the community, if you do this thing, then you are higher chances to become that particular person. I believe that. I'm not really sure am I right, am I making sense or not, I don't know, but this is what I think. I wanted to kind of like somebody decided that because of the artifact, it adds so much amount of value. I wanted to share this value to the people so that people should supposed to feel the whatever I'm kind of like getting this from the artifact. Okay, yeah. So this is I wanted to become this. I wanted to kind of like give them a kind of like a value to the artifact so that people kind of So this is kind of like things that I do, which is kind of like a higher chances to become that particular person. I don't know what that particular person would be, but my kind of like a things that adding value to the people. So yeah, am I making sense or not? I'm not really sure, but this is what I kind of like think. All right, whatever. I'm really tired. Okay, this is it.